Massad Boulos. The name itself carries an air of hushed whispers, of backroom deals and power plays. Thrust into the spotlight by his marriage to Tiffany Trump, daughter of the 45th president, Boulos found himself navigating the turbulent waters of Donald Trump's Washington. His ambition was clear: to leverage his unique position within the first family, to carve out a space for himself in the world of international diplomacy. What unfolded, however, was a story of ambition clashing with the realities of power, of family ties stretched thin, and of a reputation both bolstered and tarnished by the association with the Trump name. Boulos's entry into the Trump administration was swift, a testament to the transactional nature of power that defined the era. His appointment as a senior advisor on the Middle East raised eyebrows. He was young, inexperienced, and his primary qualifications seemed to be his proximity to the president's family. This perception followed him, casting a long shadow over his early days in Washington. While his official role focused on the Middle East, Boulos quickly turned his attention to Africa, a continent ripe with opportunities for a young man seeking to make his mark. It was a move that would define his time in the administration, for better or for worse. Boulos's foray into African affairs began with a stumble. His inaugural trip to the continent was marred by logistical issues, a harbinger of the challenges that lay ahead. The government refused to fund a military flight, forcing him to fly commercial and curtail his itinerary. The incident, widely reported in the press, painted a picture of a young man out of his depth, struggling to command respect in the high-stakes world of international diplomacy. It was a stark reminder that family ties could only take you so far. To succeed, Boulos would need to prove his worth on his own merits. The logistical hiccups of Boulos's first Africa trip were more than just a minor embarrassment. They exposed a deeper truth about his position within the administration. Despite his familial connection to the president, Boulos was an outsider, viewed with suspicion by the Washington establishment. His lack of experience and his brash, often unorthodox approach did little to endear him to the seasoned diplomats and policy wonks who populated the State Department. He was seen as a dilettante, dabbling in matters of state for personal gain. The incident also highlighted the transactional nature of the Trump administration. Loyalty to the family was paramount, but it did not guarantee smooth sailing. Boulos, despite being the son-in-law of the president's daughter, was not immune to the bureaucratic hurdles and power struggles that characterized the Trump White House. He quickly learned that to navigate this treacherous landscape, he would need to be shrewd, resourceful, and willing to operate in the shadows. Despite the initial setbacks, Boulos pressed on, determined to carve out a space for himself in the Trump administration's Africa policy. He traveled extensively throughout the continent, meeting with heads of state, business leaders, and local officials. He spoke of his desire to strengthen ties between the United States and Africa, to promote economic development and counter Chinese influence on the continent. His efforts, however, were often met with skepticism. Critics questioned his motives, suggesting that he was more interested in advancing his own business interests than in serving the interests of the United States. The whispers followed him wherever he went. Was he a well-intentioned, if inexperienced, idealist? Or was he a cunning operator seeking to profit from his family's name? The answer, like most things in Trump's Washington, was likely a bit of both. Boulos was a product of his environment, a young man on the make, in an administration where loyalty and self-interest were often intertwined. He was determined to prove his doubters wrong, but his path to redemption was fraught with obstacles. The Oval Office, a cauldron of power where decisions of global consequence were made. Massad Boulos, by virtue of his marriage to Tiffany Trump, had a seat at this table. Yet, having a seat did not equate to having a voice. He was a keen observer, present at crucial meetings, privy to confidential discussions. But his opinions, his insights, were often met with polite disinterest, a clear indication that he was tolerated rather than embraced. The old guard of the Trump administration, the seasoned politicians and strategists who had weathered numerous storms, regarded Boulos with a mixture of amusement and suspicion. They saw him as a lightweight, a political neophyte who had stumbled into a position of influence through sheer luck. His attempts to contribute to policy discussions were often rebuffed, his ideas dismissed as naive or impractical. This exclusion from the inner circle fueled a sense of frustration in Boulos. He possessed a sharp intellect and a genuine passion for international affairs, particularly in the African context. He had studied the intricacies of international diplomacy, had immersed himself in the complexities of the African continent. However, his knowledge, his enthusiasm seemed to count for little in the ruthless calculus of Washington power politics. The experience left an indelible mark on Boulos. It instilled in him a deep understanding of the limits of familial ties, of the fickle nature of power. He realized that to be truly effective, he needed to build his own network of influence, to cultivate allies and outmaneuver rivals. It was a lesson that would shape his future endeavors, pushing him to operate with a greater degree of independence, even if it meant occasionally clashing with the established order. The confines of traditional diplomacy, with its carefully worded statements and meticulously planned meetings, proved too restrictive for Massad Boulos. He craved action, tangible results. This desire, coupled with his outsider status within the administration, led him down a path of unorthodox diplomacy, often referred to as freelancing. Boulos began to operate independently, holding unauthorized meetings with foreign leaders and dignitaries, bypassing the traditional diplomatic channels. He saw himself as a deal-maker, a bridge between nations, cutting through bureaucratic red tape to achieve concrete outcomes. His efforts, while well-intentioned, often ruffled feathers within the State Department where his actions were perceived as a breach of protocol, a threat to established diplomatic norms. One particular incident exemplifies Boulos's maverick approach. He arranged a meeting with a controversial African leader, a figure shunned by the international community for human rights abuses. The meeting, conducted without the knowledge or consent of the State Department, caused a diplomatic uproar. Critics accused Boulos of undermining U.S. foreign policy, of lending legitimacy to a dictator. Boulos, however, remained undeterred. He defended his actions, arguing that dialogue, even with unsavory characters, was essential to advancing U.S. interests. He believed that his unique position, his ability to operate outside the constraints of traditional diplomacy, gave him leverage that career diplomats lacked. His actions, though controversial, reflected a growing belief that the old rules of diplomacy were no longer sufficient in a world increasingly defined by shifting alliances and unconventional power dynamics. Rumors, they say, travel faster than the speed of light. In the hushed halls, whispers of misdeeds began to surface. Some called them mere fabrications, while others swore they held a kernel of truth. The administration found itself at a crossroads, torn between loyalty and the pursuit of justice. Every whisper, every secret, added another layer to the growing tension, and the stakes, well, they had never been higher. Throughout his career, Boulos achieved significant victories on the African continent. His strategies and diplomatic efforts often turned the tide in favor of his goals. Many remember him for his ability to navigate complex political landscapes with ease. Boulos held numerous titles throughout his tenure, each reflecting a different aspect of his multifaceted role. From diplomat to strategist, his titles were as varied as his responsibilities. This maze of titles often left people wondering about the true extent of his influence. While many praised Boulos for his accomplishments, not everyone was a fan. Behind closed doors, some gritted their teeth, acknowledging his successes, but wary of his methods. His reputation was a mix of admiration and caution. Boulos's legacy is one of transactional power. He built alliances and brokered deals that left a lasting impact. His approach was pragmatic, always focused on achieving tangible results. This legacy continues to influence the political landscape today.